Hello, everybody. This is Mr. Storm, and today we're going to learn how to make a brand new game in Unity. We are going to make a copy of Snake. Snake is awesome. It's a really cool, really fun old school game. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to call mine Snurk, and it's 2D, and I'm going to put it on my desktop. And I'm going to click Create Project. And don't pay attention to that Tetris stuff. That's for next time. Come on. There we go, starting up Unity. Now, some of you have probably already noticed that my Unity environment might look a little different from your Unity environment, and that's okay. Um, Unity goes through updates pretty regularly, and your version of Unity may be newer than mine, right? And so, as long as the core mechanics of Unity work the same, there should be no issues going from one system to the next or from one update version to the next. So don't freak out if you see something a little different than what I see. Um, yeah, anyway, I guess that's all I needed to say. Perfect. So I have my Snake game here. Okay. Now the first thing I want to do is I want to adjust the camera like we did last time. First of all, I'm going to set it to black here. And I'm going to set the size to be about 40. Again, we're probably going to adjust it again once we get all of our items in there. And I think that's it. Actually, we're going to turn off the HDR and the MSAA. We'll turn those off as well. Okay, perfect. And now we want to import our assets. So I'm going to actually right click and import new asset. And let's go back to my desktop and let's go to my Snake resources. And I will grab all of these and click import. So now I have some sprites and I have some scripts here, so I'm going to organize these a little bit better. Come on. Oh, there we go. I want to create a new folder. I'm going to call this sprites. Okay, and I will dump all of my sprites in there. All right. And I'm going to create a new folder and call it scripts. Perfect. And I'm going to dump my two scripts into there as well. Beautiful. All right. So the next thing we need to do is I need to actually build my gameplay area. So I'm going to go into my sprites folder. There we go. And I have my border horizontal and my border vertical. So I want to make sure I set the pixels per unit to 1. And I want to turn off the filter for both of these. So pixels per unit 1, turn off the filter. We'll do the same thing here. 1, and we will turn off the filter. Good. And so now I can drag in 2 of these and 2 of these and start positioning them where I want them to go. So it'll be 0 on the X. We'll set that to 0 on the X. This is 0 on the Y. And this will be 0 on the Y. Okay, so now they're good. Now I just need to bring them in a little bit. So these are going to be, let's try negative 40 or 35 maybe. 35. Pretty close. So let's try positive 35 over here. Okay, good. And then these need to come down a little bit, so maybe 25? It's pretty close. It looks really good, actually. So this will be negative 25, negative 25, and these actually need to come in just a tad. So we'll do negative 34.5. Perfect. And this will be 34.5. Great. Now I can zoom in and really look at it and definitely tell that's a nice clean border. Good. Okay. Let's see. So next, let's go ahead and rename these here just so that we don't get confused. So I'm going to rename this to be border top. This one will be border bottom. Okay. This one will be border left. And this one will be border right. Perfect. So now we have our borders in there. Those are good to go. Now that we have all of those renamed, I'm going to actually select all of them. So I just clicked the top one, held down the Shift key, and clicked the bottom one because I can add my 3D box collider to all of them at the same time. So, and that's what I want to do. So I'm going to click Add Component, Physics 2D, and Box Collider 2D. So now they all have a box collider around them, which is exactly what we're looking for. Perfect. Okay. Next, let's talk about the food. So we're going to build this food using a concept called prefabrication. Prefabrication is a concept where we will create a game object and we will attach all the scripts to it, attach the sprite, do everything we need to do to that game object to make sure it can function properly, and then we make a copy of that game object itself. And then we can call in that copy, or instantiate is what it's called. We can instantiate that copy as many times as we need to using scripts. So one of the scripts for this game is a script that will instantiate food at specific intervals in a random location on your screen. So the best way to do this is to create a prefabricated object for your food, save it, and then we can bring it in whenever it needs to be brought in. So let's go ahead and build our prefab, which is short for prefabricated object. So I have my food here selected. I'm going to make sure it's 1 pixel per unit. I'm also going to turn off the filter, just like normal. Click Apply. Okay, now I want to drag one instance of my food into my game world. Okay, you can see it's this little blue square here. All right, now we need to add a couple of things to it. First of all, I need to make this food become a trigger. And the way I do that is I add a normal 3D box collider to it, and then I check is trigger. Now what that does is that allows us to set this to be a passable object with which we can trigger item or trigger lines in the script, right? So for example, the way we want this to work is whenever our snake passes over this food object, we want the food to go away and we want the snake to grow a little longer, right? Now, I don't want the snake and the food to collide with each other. I just want it to know whenever we've passed into a food area, right? So we set it to a trigger so that they don't have any collision issues. Okay, so now that is a trigger. Good to go. So at this point, we can actually just create a prefab. We can take this here and we could just dump it down into our assets area. But what I want to do is I want to make a folder for prefab. So I'm going to click folder and prefabs. Perfect. So with this prefabs folder open, I'm actually going to rename this object food prefab. Okay. And then I'm going to drop it right into here. Boom. So now we have a food prefab, and notice that this turns blue, right? That means that's a prefabricated object in my hierarchy. And we can actually delete it now because we don't need it anymore, because now we have this food prefab. And what we could do is we can just drag out as many instances of this object as we need to. And all of these now have the box collider with the trigger, right? All of them are the right size, the right shape, everything else, and it'll just create as many of those as we need. That's why we use prefabricated objects. Okay, so let's talk about how to spawn some food. Well, if we take a look at our scripts here, I have a spawn food script, and I don't know why I opened that in Visual Studio. You don't care or need to know. All right, let me close that out once it opens. Sorry, old habits die hard. I'm gonna click cancel, and everything's gonna shut down. It's gonna freak out on me. All right, anyway, let's take a look at the script over here because we can see a preview of the script in the inspector here. So what this is going to do is it's going to spawn food every 4 seconds starting in 3. So basically it's going to wait a couple seconds and spawn food. And then it spawns one piece of food, and that piece of food is going to be based on what our prefabricated object is. And so the way we're going to do this, and here's the thing, we don't want to attach this script to a prefab because the prefabs aren't going to be loaded when we first start this game. We also don't want to attach this to anything that possibly could be deleted or removed from the game. So we want to actually attach this script to the camera because the camera is always going to be there. It's never going to go away, right? So I'm going to take this spawn food, I'm going to attach it to the camera. Now when I click on the camera, I can go down here and I can see that I have a spawn food script. Now, there are a lot of public variables in the spawn food script that I've given us so that our script can actually work properly. Sorry. The first one is this food prefab. We need to indicate or tell the game, tell Unity, what prefabricated object is our food, right? So it's this food prefab here. All we have to do is grab it, drop it over here, and then now it's going to spawn those every time. The next thing we want to indicate would our borders, so our top border, bottom, left, and right. The reason why we need to indicate these borders is because we don't want to spawn any food outside of the, oh. So be careful with that. Whenever you're clicking and moving things around, make sure you keep the camera selected. Anyway, so we want to make sure that the food only spawns inside the border boundaries. So we want to make sure it doesn't spawn outside of the border because our snake will never be able to get that piece of food because it's outside of the gameplay area. So we need to indicate what those or where those areas are. So I'm going to drop in these borders here so that our script can constrain our food spawning. Okay, so now that that is all set up, let's see, what else do we need to build? So that's there. Actually, let's test out. Let's make sure our spawn script is still working or is actually working. First, I'm going to save my scene though because I haven't done that yet. So I'm going to save it as main, click save, and then I'm going to go in here and create a scenes folder. Okay, and I'm going to drop my main in the scenes folder. Beautiful. All right, now I'm going to save my project. I'm going to click play. Okay, so my border's there. We can see that we have food popping in at about 4-second intervals. Food's coming in. And over here you can see in the hierarchy, every time a new prefab is spawned, it actually is tagged with this word clone. It is a clone of a prefabricated object. And you can see it's randomly spawning, and we don't have anything spawning outside of the boundary of the game, which is what we want. Okay, good. So the game's actually working. So the next thing we need to do is build our snake. Now, specifically, the way we're going to build our snake is we're just going to use the snake head. We're going to build a head of the snake, and then our snake script is going to dictate how it moves, and it's also going to handle the snake growing every time it eats some food. All right, so I have my snake sprite selected. I'm going to set it to 1 pixel per unit. I'm going to turn off the filter, click apply. I'm going to drop my snake in there somewhere. Okay. Now, I actually want to rename this. I don't want it to be called snake. So I'm going to rename this and call it head because that's what it is the head of the snake. And then I also want to make sure that I have a couple things. First of all, I need a box collider 2D. So let's do that. Let's add a box collider 2D. And I also need a rigid body 2D because this is going to be the object that's moving. Matter of fact, the only object that moves in this game. Okay, now with the rigid body 2D, please remember that you want to turn off the gravity scale for a game like this because we don't want our object to fall down at the bottom. I'm also going to constrain my rotation because I don't want my thing moving around or rotating on accident. Okay, so that's good there. Let's see. Looks pretty good. The box collider is really nice and tight around it. All right, good. So let's see. All right, so Now what we can do is we can use this here to create a tail prefab. So here's the way it works. So I have my head here, right? And I want my head to stay there. I need my head in there, but then I want to use this same thing to be a tail prefab. So I'm going to drag head into here. Actually, you know what? No, first what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate. Let me duplicate this, drag this into here, and I'm going to rename it to, I'm going to rename it over here to tail, hold on a second, tail prefab. Okay. That didn't work. Let's actually delete this one. Fine. All right, so we have tail prefab here. Let's drop this guy in there. Boom, tail prefab. So now we have a head and a tail prefab, and we can delete the tail prefab from here. So now we have a tail prefab and a head object, right? We don't need a head prefab because we're only spawning one head at the very beginning of the game. The prefabs are going to spawn continuously as we play. Okay, so now I want to attach a script to my head, and that script is the only other script we have, which is the snake script. I want to attach that to the head of the snake. I'm going to attach that, and then when I look over here, I can see that I have my snake script. Now it's asking me for that tail prefab. What is it? Well, let's go back to my prefabs, grab the tail, and drop that right in there. So now, if we've done everything right, now we should be able to play the game. The snake should move, and the snake will grow as it eats food. So let's give it a shot. Okay, so I'm able to move. Let's go back here. Let's go down. And you can see I ate the food and my tail grew by one section once I passed over the food. So our game's actually working. Oh, I missed it. It would work if I actually knew how to play, if I can play games. There we go. And we're getting bigger. So the game's actually working. We could add a bunch to this. We could add a scoring engine. We can add some user interface elements on it. Add like a HUD or something with the score up top. We can have a menu. There's all kinds of stuff we could do this game. But I'm going to leave it here because once you get this game to a playable state like this, where I can actually play the game, then you're done. Whatever time you have left, if you want to embellish and add some stuff to it or change some of the graphics around or whatever you want to do, that is up to you. But once you get a playable Snake game, then you are finished with this project. All right, so I'm going to remind you, I'm going to show you how to build your project again. I'm going to save scenes, save project, and then I'm going to go to build settings. Okay, player settings. I'm going to make sure that my display resolution dialog box is disabled. And I am going to turn off full screen switch. And I'm going to turn off default as full screen. Okay, so once those are good, we're good. Actually, let's change the icon for this too. Why not? It'll be fun. Let's see, override, and let's say, let's just pick our assets. Let's do snake. Let's pick the snake head right there. See if that works. It's just going to be a red or a white square, but at least it's different. It's better than just the Unity logo, right? By the way, that's how you change your icon. You can also change your splash image in here. You can change elements about the splash image. You can actually dump in your own splash image. So there's all kinds of cool stuff you can do. But I'm satisfied with how it looks now. I'm going to click build and run. And I'm going to call it Snurk. And save. And it's going to take its time, like always, like it always does. Taking its time. Almost there. Come on. So really the big change, the big new thing that you're learning this week is prefabricated objects. That's the important part. If you understand how prefabs work, then you're really going to understand how game development works as a whole, right? So think about other objects that could be prefabricated. Things like bullets from a gun, right? We don't want to create every individual bullet. So what we can do is create a bullet prefab, and then every time the the trigger is pulled or whatever, uh, a new prefabricated clone or a new clone of that prefabricated bullet object flies out of the bullet or out of the gun and hits the enemy, right? So that's kind of how prefabs work. It allows us to create an object that we just make a copy of over and over again as we go, right? Okay, cool. So that's the Snake game. It works. It's playable. I love these games, so I'm going to turn it off now because if not, I would just play it all day. And I'm going to cut this video here. Please have fun making this game. And again, if you have more time, please embellish on it and do as much as you can to make it interesting or fun because I'm grading a lot of these. So if I see something new or interesting, it makes me excited. So thank you again, and I will see you next time. I don't know why that sounded like a question. Thank you very much. I will see you next time.